great project or a great product in that sense. But super lovely. I think Suresh or can anybody just share my PPT? Yes, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So I think, folks, one of the things that I want to start today is I don't want to give general gyan on how to become a product manager, but rather because that information is widely available on the internet, you can just go out and you will find. I just want to talk about something far more fundamental, which is like how do you build a product mindset and what is a product mindset generally, right? So I've written something like building a product mindset, solving problems at scale. I think I've given the intro is already given over there. I currently work as a group product manager. I take care of the product division for Banzu, and fortunately, I've worked with very good unicorn companies who have scaled very fast, looking at uh, different kind of scale opportunities, seen products which have worked at a scale of 100 million users, probably at 500 million users. Simultaneously, also have seen products which have started from zero users to essentially move to 1,000 users or 10,000 users. So very fortunate that in the last 8 years, God has been very kind for me to work with good people. So I've seen different parts of the journey. And this is some of the learnings from my journey specifically. And I hope it adds value to your life. We can move forward. Yeah. So I think the first thing that I want to kind of talk about is that what is this thing called a first principle? What is the first principle? So let me just ask, and I want to keep this session as engaging as possible, where I want your responses majorly. So let me ask this very interesting question to you. If all of you folks, and I tell you that you have to take a car from Hyderabad to maybe Vijayawada, and I give you two options, right? The first option is you can take a Nano, and the second option is you can take a Mercedes. What would you choose? Is it the first option or the second option? I want people in the chat to give a response. If I tell you that you have to go from A to B and I give you two options, the first car is a Nano and the second car is a Mercedes, right? So I see everybody is kind of putting Mercedes, Mercedes. Very cool, very cool. So everybody wants to go. So I think the first thing that comes from this very statement is that anything that adds value to your life adds some amount of happiness to your life, right? That you essentially see that, okay, the comfort that I get in Mercedes is something that I want to drive, right? So it adds some amount of comfort, some amount of happiness to your life. Now, let me repeat this question again. And I say that if I ask this question 10 times to you, will your answer change? I say that you have to go from Vijayawada or maybe from Hyderabad to Vijayawada. And 10 times I ask you, 10 different times, that would you take a Nano, would you take a Mercedes? Will your answer change? I just need a response. Would you even move from a Mercedes to Nano? I don't think anybody would do that. So the second statement says that any experience that adds value to your life, you want to repeat that experience. You want to consistently do that experience again and again. So if A is equal to B, that anything that adds value to your life or comfort to your life adds some amount of happiness to your life, anything that adds happiness to your life adds some, you want to repeat that experience. So which essentially means that anything that adds value to your life or any service that adds value to your life, you want to repeat that experience. And that's why you would have heard this thing that anything that is a great product, there is high retention in the product, that people want to do that activity again and again. So this comes from this very same first principle. So a first principle is a fundamental statement which does not change over a significant period of time. So this was asked to Jeff Bezos. So Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, and he was asked this question that what would you do in the next 10 years for the growth of Amazon, right? He said, I would ideally look at those things which don't change with time so that I know that behavior pertains. So that's why he said that customer success is truly important, even if it's 40 years later in the future or it's right now. Simultaneously, they want to give you the best price, the best discovery, right? That's not going to change. People are not going to pay more for something when they can get it for less. So first principles are generally those statements which are actually true, on which you can build a thesis or you can build a layer of a product and say that since I believe that this is true, this hypothesis is true, anything that I build on top of it is going to add value to people's life. Now, if you add these first principles together, like in a line, that's what you call a mental model. I've written the second thing over there. What's a mental model? Right? Now, mental models are a way to define reality. Right? Let me ask you another question. How many of you guys use this platform called Swiggy or Zomato or anything, right, to order food at any point of time, right? I think everybody would have used them at some point in their life, right? Now, how many of you guys, whenever they want to order something or food or something like that, they actually go to a restaurant, stand there in a queue, and then actually get the food by spending like 3 hours or 4 hours over there on a line? I don't think anybody does that anymore, because there's a behavior shift that has happened in the last 7 years, or since the companies like Swiggy, Zomato, everybody have started up, right? So that's a mental model, right? How do you design reality, and how do you understand reality, so that I know that this mental model is true, anything that I build on top of it is generally going to stay true, right? So now, why am I telling you all of those things, right? This is where true product management kind of starts from, right? Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah. So what is a product, right? To define in simpler terms, right? A product is an experience which solves a user pain point and gives a 10x better value. Now, why have I written like 10x better value, right? Let me ask another very interesting question to you, right? How many of you guys think that IRCTC, which is the train booking app, is a bad product, is a bad service? I just need answer yes or no to that answer, right? How many of you think that it's a bad service? Okay, very, very bad. Okay, so there are some people who are saying it's very, very bad, right? It's bad, it's improving now, no choice. Understood, right? But if you go like 12, 13 years back in your life, or probably 2005, 2006, when I was in like 10th grade or 11th grade, right? That was the only option, right? You just had to go to the train station, you had to stand there in a queue, and if you got a ticket, well enough. If you didn't, that's your choice. Like, that's your kismat, or that's your luck, that you essentially got a ticket or not. Now, somebody in 2006 or 2007 essentially thought that the same time that essentially takes to book a ticket, which is like 2 hours or 3 hours, can I just change that behavior and build something that can be done in 10 minutes? So from that perspective, and they built something like IRCTC, where you could do the same thing. You could just log in, select the place from and to, and it would tell you that whether you can get a ticket or not, right? Now, what you guys are currently doing is you're comparing it to Make My Trip. But imagine, and then you're saying that Make My Trip has a great UI, great UX, it's a great product that way, right? That's why IRCTC is bad, or it's screwed that way, right? But if you go back 14, 12, 13 years back, when there was nothing, it was an innovation, right? You're doing something which used to take you 3.5 hours to do. Now the same thing, you can do it in 5 minutes. So from a product perspective, it is like a product is a service which essentially gives you a 10x better value based on the preceding experience. That's really important. You have to see what was my previous experience before this product got built, right? Similarly, think of Paytm as a platform, right? They initially, why did they start with a wallet? Because they wanted to integrate it everywhere, and so that you can make payments and there is no payment drop off, that you get an OTP and stuff like that and whatever and whatnot. And eventually that evolved into the structure which the Indian government built itself, which is UPI. That was the same thesis, right? So to define in simpler terms, and this a product is an experience which gives you a 10x better experience based on the preceding experience solving a user pain point, right? Now, there are three core most important qualities of a great product, right? And I'll tell you what product managers do, why, where they come in, but I just want to set the context before that. This is something that, so there are three very important qualities. We can move to the next slide. Yeah. So there are three very interesting qualities. The first quality is, whenever you build a product, there has to be significant value-based differentiation. What I mean by that is, let me give you another example, right? So I'm a Kashmiri, right? So my mother has this interesting habit of buying pashmina shawls. Wherever she goes, she wants a pashmina shawl. And what she used to do, at least when I used to stay in Jammu, she used to take me and roam around the entire city and figure out, there is a great shawl, there is a great shawl, there is a great shawl. I'll buy it from here, I'll buy it from there. And it used to take her like 7, 8 hours. The entire day used to go there. Now, do you know what she does? She goes to flipkart.com. She writes best pashmina shawls. She figures out her criteria of price, filter, etc., etc., etc. Damn. 2 minutes, the order is done. This is an experience she's never going to forget. And she always does that. Now, at least I am free now. She doesn't call me anymore. And again, please come with me and do this. So the first thing is that you build something which is like radical in nature, right? Which is like, wow, what is happening? This the same thing which used to take me so much time, so much effort, is taking me very little time. So any product which you essentially build, which needs to have high adoption, has to have some level of significant differentiation. The second thing is simplicity of experience. Now let me put it another question to you. How many of you guys use Uber or Ola? I think everybody does, right? I just need answers in the chat. How many of you use Uber or Ola? I think everybody does, right? Fair. Now, let me ask this interesting question to you, that if Uber or Ola, when you opened the app, right, from instead of showing from and to, that where you want to go, and they showed some random page and you had to discover it after 15 minutes, you figured out that there is some place where you can put from and to, right? Would you use that app? That if it took you just 20 minutes to just discover the very same value prop that they're offering, that you have to go from one place to another, and you were not able to discover that, you would not use that app, right? So the second most important criteria of a great product is simplicity of experience. Let me give you another example around this, right? So the phone that you have in your pockets right now, do you know the same computing power used to be in a supercomputer in 1960s? And do you know what's the size of that supercomputer? Right? It used to be like 2-story big, that big. Like in my college, we had this Param 3. Param 3 is a supercomputer, and IIT Roorkee bought it back, and the size of that was almost like a 2-storied building, right? The great part is that now, because you guys use iPhones and stuff like that, the same computing power sits in your pocket. So you essentially are using a supercomputer, right? But you realize that while setting up an iPhone, it takes you 10 minutes and you're able to use it. Imagine as powerful a device sitting in your pocket and it takes you 10 minutes to start using it. How great of a simple experience of onboarding they've built. You don't even if you give it to your sons and daughters, they'll start using it in 5 minutes and they'll start playing games and stuff like that. The second most important criteria is that how simply can you give that value to the end user. Another very good example is that if you look at things like makemytrip.com, cleartrip.com, ixigo.com, all of these flight booking companies, why do you think these companies have the same UI? Anywhere you go, you'll find from to how many people, search. That's the same design any website you take anywhere in the world. They might have different colors on the website, they might have different button sizes, but the UX, the way that the consumer looks at that website, the action that the consumer has to take is similar. So because they realize this is the most simple experience for people to discover that this is the value that the product gives me, right? That's the second most critical part of building a great product. And third and the most underrated part is that, do you really enjoy using the product? Let me put another very interesting question, which I generally ask people. How many of you have used Rediff Mail, Yahoo Mail, and Gmail? All three, right? In some way or the other, right? I think everybody has used, right? Now, can you really tell me from a value prop perspective, right? Is there a difference between Rediff Mail and Gmail anywhere? Both send emails, both can put drafts, both can do whatever you wish to do, sending an email, editing a draft, doing everything. But why does everyone use Gmail? Has anybody ever thought of that? That you have an alternate service which does exactly the same thing, right? But everybody uses Gmail. Yes, Gmail has several, absolutely. So the third part that is very, very cool and interesting there is that Gmail, the way that the product has been built, there is an element of joy. So let me put it this way. There are two layers always to a product, right? The first thing is called a product layer, and the second thing is called a service layer, right? Now, the product layer in itself, think of it as a toy, right? So whenever I give this example, is that great products are toys, right? So you play a game, but you play with toys. There's a difference in this statement. You play a game, you play football, but you play with a ball. And the goal of playing football is generally not to score a goal. That's an outcome, right? The goal is that, do I enjoying play with the ball, right? So whenever you start using Gmail, you compose an email, you write hello, and Suresh automatically comes and says, oh wow, this is like a toy. The other, they are just suggesting me what is next to write. Now they built Help Me Write. They recently launched it, I think a week back or something, and you're able to write. So you feel like that you're actually using a toy, and that experience is something that says that anytime I want to write an email, this is the best place to do it, because they give me so many things, right? I feel like that I'm enjoying that experience, right? Why do you think then Google, when they built UPI, initially they built a lot of gamification in UPI. They used to give you cashbacks and stuff like that. The reason was not that phone pay was not doing that. The reason was because whenever you think of a transaction, you feel that this is the best flow that I want to approach, because this is so lovely that I enjoy the entire gamification part, that I enjoy the process of making a transaction itself, let alone the transaction being successful or not, right? So the third and most critical part, which most good products are now bringing in, are the very same fact that can we build joy in usage of experience of the product itself. And that's why good companies like Intercom, if you look at B2B enterprise companies like probably Salesforce, everybody's trying to move towards a point that the end consumers should actually enjoy the product layer itself, let alone the service layer, that whatever value they're giving at the end of it, it's a good thing, right? So that's the part of a great product, that there has to be an element of joy. How do you make it fun so that the product layer is compelling enough that even though the same service is offered by 10 other people, you still want to use the same product layer? Everybody with me, aligned with me, right? I hope if everybody is with me, give me a yes in the chat. Yeah. Now I want to talk about something, two very interesting things, which is generally one resides in the product management space and one resides in the project management space. So I want to talk about this. So there are two things that are very critical when you start thinking about how do I solve a problem at scale, whether you join a large enterprise company as a project manager and look at things, or you join a startup, or you join a B2B company, or you join a B2C company, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, right? So the two spaces are something is called, the first thing is called a problem space, and the second thing is called a solution space, right? What do you mean by a problem space, right? Problem space is something where you essentially ask these fundamental questions. Who is my end user? Why am I building it for him, right? Why does it make sense, right? What's my hypothesis, right? You've not built anything till now. There is no code, no production, nothing has happened, right? You're still in the problem space, right? Like I'll give you a very interesting example, and actually a very funny one. So long back in 1970s, these Soviets and the Americans, they had like, who is more intellectually better, right? And they used to build like, there was a space war, then there was a espionage war, and they used to do all of these things. So the problem statement was that how do you essentially like write in space, right? Because there is no gravity, right? So what happened was the Americans, right? They said, we'll build a pen. We'll actually build a pen and we'll write, and they spend millions and millions and millions of dollars in building that pen, and said that we built an anti-gravity pen. So, but if you rephrase the question, right, the very same question, that how do you enable someone to write in space, does not need to have an answer of $1 million pen. Do you know what the Soviets did? They said, we'll send a pencil. And the same thing happened. Yes, that's true. So what I essentially mean to say is that product managers are people who essentially spend a lot of time in the problem space. That, what am I building? Why am I building it? Why does it make sense, right? And 70% of the time is to build on that particular hypothesis, that do I really know that this is what my user demands, or this is something that adds value to people's lives, right? And that is extremely critical. Once you move from that space to the solution space, that is where the most part of program management or project management comes in. That now there is a structure, you know that this is important to the end user. Then the program manager or the project manager would essentially say, okay, the design part will be taken by the designer, there will be developers who would do the back end, and my role is that does that the execution happen the right way as intended by the business, right? So that I can deliver that kind of a product, right? So most of the project managers and the program managers, they spend a lot of time in the solution space, right? That this is built, how do I execute it the right way? How do I ensure that it happens in the right time? How do I ensure that there is the right build quality, right? So, but that doesn't mean that these two are different. No, these two are very, very actively tied. Very, very actively tied. People who understand the problem space well essentially will do well in the solution space as well, right? That is why it is extremely critical. That's why I said that the role of a product manager is not necessarily just to give specs or write documents or whatever. The role of a product manager is to first define what to build, how to build, for whom to build, and then take it to the end goal. So actually a product manager is just a superset. He's also thinking on the problem space, or she's also thinking on the problem space, and he's thinking on the solution space, right? That's the only difference. And project management is an integral part. If you don't do that well, you are not a good product manager. It's as simple as that. As simple as that. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is that how do you essentially even decide that what problem is important, what problem is not important, right? Now the question is, because there's this one very famous statement by, I don't know how many of you guys know, there was this guy called Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz is the founder of the VC firm called Anderson Horowitz. Anderson Horowitz is a very large VC firm. They have invested in tons of companies. So Ben Horowitz, he essentially wrote something very, very interesting, right? He was the founder of SoundCloud, which he essentially sold out to Oracle for $1 billion, right? And then he wrote this very interesting book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. He talks about this very interesting thing, a first principle thesis, that how do I understand that somebody is facing a problem, right? And there is a problem at scale that I need to solve for, right? So it talks about this interesting funnel called the compassion funnel, right? So most product managers, what they do, so like I'll give you an example. What is compassion, right? Compassion is something that you call in Hindi or in Sanskrit karuna. Karuna, the attitude or the gratefulness or something where you can feel the pain of the other person, right? Like I'll give you an example. If I am sure all of you have gone through COVID and COVID has been a bad time, right? But assume that if I ask you this question today, that folks, if today you see some of any of your friend who is very close to you actually facing some problems with COVID, what's the first thought that comes to your head? The first thought that comes to your head is that how do I help that person? How do I do something around that? Right? Maybe he needs oxygen, maybe he needs something else, something like that, right? So that is where compassion originates. That when you see that the other person is actually facing a problem, wow, how do I solve that, right? Compassion in generally leads to curiosity, right? That okay, now there's a problem, I know and I want to solve this problem, right? How do I solve it? So it develops that innate ability when you start thinking from an entrepreneurial perspective, that this is important, this is not important, this is important, this is not important, and this is how I will be able to build a solution. So probably you built a solution, you said that I'll buy 20 oxygen cylinders, and you brought 20 oxygen cylinders and you gave it to people who are in need, right? Now, as a product manager, you'll start thinking from that lens that, okay, I bought it for 20 people, but is this the problem for 20 people? Actually, there are 20 million people who are suffering from this because everybody needed oxygen, right? It then translates to passion, that how do I solve this problem at scale? How do I do that? Right? Then there can be multiple ideas around it. Build a platform around it where people can just say that we have inventory, you can purchase, you can do tons of things around that. And the fourth part is, once you have passion, you start thinking from a scale of solution perspective. That, okay, now if I have to build it at scale, what are the things that I need to take for? So from a thinking standpoint, most problems arise when you look at other people. When you start, and it happens in small feature sets also. I'll give you an example. So while I was working for Flipkart, right, and I'm talking about 2016, right, we had just gotten our first 100 million users, right? We were doing a large GMV at that point of time. And one of the things that I essentially saw, that most of the marketing people, they had a very bad time in giving the right offers to people, and it was very manual, right? Every day they used to spend like 6, 7, 8 hours doing that. Now I had nothing to do with them as a product manager. I was taking care of a different product entirely. But since I was working with them day in day out, because my feature was relevant too, right? I started realizing, oh, this is a problem, and they're spending 8 hours of their precious time on just setting up offers. How bad is that? Well, these are people with insane salaries of like 50 lakh, 60 lakh, and I would essentially want to use their bandwidth somewhere else. Why am I doing this? Right? So I built a very small wireframe and thought that this does this work or does this not work? Took them to the marketing people and they were amazed. The reason that they were amazed was not the fact that I built a wireframe and actually executed something. The reason that they were amazed was that I realized that there's a problem which other people didn't. And that's the first quality of a great PM, right? You always listen to people. You always try to understand what their problems are, and then in retrospect try to understand what's the scale of the problem. If the scale of the problem is large, then at that point of time you start thinking that what do I need to solve, how do I do this? So that's the first principle. How do you identify problems? Is by looking for people around it, whether it's a B2B business, whether it's a B2C business, whether it's a any kind of business. Problems are everywhere. The only thing that you have to ensure is that are people comfortable enough to talk to you. So there is a very great statement by George Bernard Shaw. He said that sometimes the best way to gain control is to give control, which is again very funny if you understand that you're just talking about paradoxical statements, right? Sometimes the best way to gain control is to give control. So which what essentially means is product manager, the first principle of product management is that you listen to people, you listen to people around you, and you identify what's the problem, right? Cool. We'll move forward. Everybody with me aligned till now? Sure. So again, I talked about that project management is a body part of the craft of product management. If you don't do it right, you don't build a great product, period. As simple as that, right? So as you move from the problem space to the solution space, then it becomes a very critical part that I know now I have an ambiguous problem. Now I have an ambiguous problem. I want to break it down and I want to do like 5 different steps to essentially, and that is the role of a project manager, right? And then it becomes exceedingly simple. Like if I tell you that my problem statement is that I want to build like a trading platform for amateur traders. They're not like financial traders, great financial traders, but amateur traders, right? What did, and there are platforms like that. I'll give you examples. Zerodha is one, Upstocks is another, Grow is another, right? And they're all billion-dollar companies. Why are they billion-dollar companies? Because they initially did a very good user research, tried to understand what their problem is, spent considerable time in the problem space, and then executed it well. And they built features on top of it. And that is where the project management or the program management part came in. If these two didn't work in tandem together, you would not see a unicorn, you would not see a billion-dollar product. It's as simple as that, right? So everybody aligned that it's just two legs of the same human. It's not like most of the times people tell me that when people tell me that you are a product manager or you're a project manager, people typically get offended. कि अरे यार क्या बोल रहे हो? लेकिन to be very honest, there's very little difference. Only the difference in the thought and the mindset that's needed initially, right? यहाँ तक सब aligned हो? ठीक है. Moving forward, yes. So I want to talk about a few types of product managers which are going to be like very critical, right? So assume that you're a software developer, right? And what is the most, or you are a program manager, technical program manager, or something like a tech lead or something like that. The fastest way to move into product management is probably to understand what is technical product management, right? Because it's very similar to your skill set. You've tried to seed engineering problems at scale. You've tried to understand that how do I build system design, better system design, and do things like that, right? So how do you become a TPM? Is someone who is generally given a responsibility, right, to understand that the core problem is that how do I build a system which works at like scale of 100 million hits a second or something like that, right? If you do think so, a TPM essentially is more on the lines of that how do I build a great engineering product, right? And you would see that these roles are widely open in companies like Amazon, in companies in other places. So a TPM is transitioned from to product from engineering, right? It also means that they spend considerable less time on things like marketing, sales, and other part, right? Because that's not their role, right? So it's not that consumer facing, but it is something that most people from tech backgrounds can easily move into, and they have to learn how to. So the core part where you have to understand is that a TPM is a role where business will come to you. They would say that these are the 5 things we want to develop, right? These are the 5 features that we want, or these are the 5 requirements that we have. The TPM would then write technical specs and make it easily consumable for the engineers or the engineering part of the company to essentially build that across. That communication layer is where that TPM fits in. That how do I translate an ambiguous consumer facing requirement into a technical spec which is easily understood at a task level by the engineers, and they can essentially build it across. That is the first part. So you would ideally see a very good one of the bad parts of becoming a TPM is again there, that since you don't have a lot of consumer facing interactions, right? You typically tend to over optimize for building a great engineering product, which might not be the need of the hour, right? Like I'll give you an example, right? If essentially every product is waterfall, right? And you keep on building, and then you release it after like 12 months, right? And if you did take the hypothesis wrong, right, then the entire 12 months is gone. It's wasted, right? Nobody's going to use it, right? But that is the reason the entire philosophy of lean startup or agile philosophy came into that. You would break down the tasks into times where you can actionably get feedback that whether you're building the right thing or not, again and again, right? So that is where TPMs have a very strong role. There are good, great engineering companies. There are companies like Honeycomb. There are companies like Intercom. There are companies like PagerDuty. Very strong technical product management roles. Insane problem solving ability. That is the first role that I would want to kind of talk about. The pitfall is, again, I told you, it's slightly far away from business, right? So you generally don't have that much business context. So good technical product managers start developing business context as well. That's why one of the things, so like you're using WebEx, the Zoom founder essentially told all their engineers to talk to their consumers so that they can become TPMs and understand that they are just not building something in silo. They understand what's the consumer requirement. So their engineers actually became product managers, right? Everybody with me till now? Right? Give me a yes in the chat. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Amazing. Let's move to the next slide. Yeah. Then the second part is the data product manager, which is like popular day over with the advent of generative AI, LLMs, generative adversarial networks, GAN, all of those things, right? This is a role which is very self-explanatory. It is typically comes from a place where you have spent considerable time on data management and analysis, right? Whether you were an analyst, whether you were a investment analyst, whether you were working probably as a marketing manager or something like that on that background, or probably you were working as a program manager who's managing a large project where there is a lot of time spent on KPIs, which is key performance indicators. This is specifically a role where people essentially move into. Now, in this role, people spend considerable amount of time probably with data scientists, data analysts, so that they can essentially put forward the learnings from the data scientists and make it consumable for business to take. What I mean by that is, for example, a data scientist gives you a value of like builds a model and says that there's an R square of whatever, and the possibility of that somebody will take a loan, right, is 90%, right? Now this is something that probably the data scientist who has that background understands. Nobody in engineering understands what he means by an R square, right? Nobody in business understands what he means by an R square. This is where a data PM comes in. He says that I'll build a layer in between. I'll take these insights, I'll transform them into a part where it's easily consumable by the rest of the 2 other people, right? And prioritize those across and put it across to business that why it makes sense, right? Right. So this is what a data PM does. They are very good at doing analysis. They're very good at understanding what algorithms you're putting across. So people who generally come from a business analysis, business analyst, then probably coming from a data scientist kind of a background, they easily move into these kind of roles, right? Now, what is the pitfall of this role? The pitfall of this role is product management is a function where intuition and data work hand in hand together. So there's a lot of misconception where people say that you have to be data driven. I don't think you have to be data driven, right? You have to be data enabled, right? Data is just one more vector in your thinking to build a great product. That if I have data, it's a good thing. I know that it's telling me something that, okay, directionally, this means this, right? Direction. Something like, do you think, so let me ask this very interesting question to you. Do you think you guys, all of you would have credit cards, right? Do you think that your credit score is the only thing that determines what credit limit do you have? Come on. Yes. Do you think it's the only thing that determines that what is the credit limit that you actually would have? There are multiple factors, right? So a credit limit is just a factor, right? Similarly, data is just a vector, right? That this is also a vector where I look at and define my product specs that way, that okay, my data is also telling me this. Awesome. So people in data product management unfortunately get engulfed in this thought process that everything needs data backing, everything needs something like that. So you have to essentially build intuition around it. So the data PM role is somewhere where people from business analyst backgrounds, data scientist background, engineering backgrounds can easily move into. We'll move forward. Yeah. Now there is a very interesting role which has recently come up, and good companies have started doing that, which is like the growth product manager. What do you mean by growth product manager? Growth product manager is someone who works very closely with business, with sales, right? You'll find people in like generally product managers in Google who work on consumer apps, right, are typically from the role of a growth PM, right? What essentially means is they work on business plans on that this is the spend that I'm going to do and this is the ROI that I want. So they consistently focus a lot more on core business metrics. What's the revenue? What's the profit? Is the business model profitable? Is the product profitable? Right? Now, and they consistently start focusing on growth initiatives. That how do I get my next customer faster? How do I essentially build a service which a lot of people can use? Like, I'll give you an example of that. So Microsoft Teams, I'm sure a lot of you would be using Microsoft Teams in like, so why do you think it became so successful that it crossed Slack, which started like 3 years, 4 years back, right? And this crossed with 75 million. Satya Nadella himself said, right, that we have crossed Slack like 3x, three more, 3x number of times the consumers that are there on Slack. The very reason is that Microsoft is a vertically integrated ecosystem, right? Even though their features are not as good as Slack, but their sales network, their enterprise support is that profound that they said, okay, we don't have a great product as good as Slack, but we have like a flurry of 20 products. And if you add them, the value of all them together, it's more than the value of Slack. You can use this, you can use this, you can use this, you can use this. And that is why growth product management roles are very critical there, because they leverage this kind of thing that I have networks, I have sales people who are working with large enterprise clients, and I'll move there, right? Now, what is the pitfall here? The pitfall here is, since you start focusing a lot more on revenue, you let go of the user experience. You typically don't give a lot of time on the user experience, and that is bad, right? You would see that initially in the last 8 9 years back, you would see these websites and you just logged into a website and you'll get pop-ups, buy this, right? Maybe people clicked, maybe they didn't, right? But how bad was the user experience, right? So growth PM, while he or she has to focus that how do I make this a revenue generating or a profit generating product, right? They also have to focus on a lot more on the user experience, because there are a lot of things that you essentially don't develop for revenue. You just say that it is a great experience that I want to build, and it is going to in turn add value from a revenue, right? Let's do the next one. Yeah. And the next part is called the business product manager, which is a general product manager. It is the product manager which you feel that you say that the MBA kid who is pretty versed in business operations and finance and the engineering terminology, right? He talks about all of these things, APIs, system design, etc. He talks about what is ROI, what is return on ad spend. There's all of those jargons, right? It is like the common product manager theme, right? But what I want you to focus and really understand from this is that any PM role starts from how do you start thinking about or building a great hypothesis. That is the essential part of it. Whether it's a TPM, whether it's a GPM, whether it's a platform PM, whether it's a business PM, whether it's a data PM, whether it's an AI PM, I don't care for that matter. What is far more important is that how do you build the right hypothesis that how would it would add value. Everybody with me till now? Aligned? Just give me a yes in the chat. Awesome. Amazing. Cool. Let's move forward. Yeah. Now, the next interesting thing is how do you build a great product, right? There's a typical journey. I'll just quickly move through. There are 5 interesting steps. Why I wanted to put forward this slide in front of you is that whenever you build a product, this is the journey of a product, right? The journey of a product starts from acquisition and then activation, then retention, then referral, and then something called revenue, right? So as product managers, you start thinking from this entire journey piece that my role is not to just build a feature or getting that program executed in a certain way, right? My role is to start thinking from the fact that how do I acquire my customer? How do I active? What I mean by activation is how do I essentially build the first value to the end consumer? And then if you give enough value, the customer will automatically retain. It will automatically tell the other customer that you can refer, right? And simultaneously it will bring me something called revenue. So this is a general method of building a user flow for building a great product, right? So this is something also what product managers essentially do. They start looking at different pieces of the funnel, that where do I belong, where does my business sit in. Is it right now in the activation stage? Is it now in the retention stage? Is it somewhere that they have to make money and things like that, right? I don't want to go deep here, we are constrained on time, but I just wanted to kind of give this outlook to you. Let's move forward. Yeah. We can just skip these next 2-3 slides, and I essentially want to kind of move towards slightly. Just move ahead. Yes. Let's go back. Let's go back. Yeah, just one slide, right? So another thing that I want to kind of put across, and this is really important, right, is that whenever we think about product management, we always start thinking that it is our project management in that general piece, that we always start thinking that the product is something that we can use, right? It is something that it's an app, it's a platform, it's something that you log in, etc. That comes very late, very late. It's not even like most of the products that I've made. I've probably spent 70% of the time not even writing the first or probably looking at the first version of the design. That comes very late. So this is something like which you called an information architecture of design, right? So the bottommost layer is called conceptual design. How do you conceptual why do you essentially think that whenever you open Uber or Google Maps, the interface is of a map itself? Why can't it be a list, like one place in Banjara Hills, second place somewhere else in Hyderabad? Why can't it be a list? Why is it like a map? Have you ever thought about it? Like Google Maps, why is it like a map? Why can't it be some other interface? Because whenever you start thinking of going from A to B, the first thing that comes to your mind is how does the route look like? How do I essentially see from where I have to go? So you automatically configure that it should be ideally like a map. Ideally like a map, right? Same with Uber, same with Ola, same with Swiggy. To be very, but on the contrary, Swiggy's experience is towards the end of it after you place an order, right? Before that, that experience is not there, right? So product managers spend a lot of time on conceptual design, right? That what will, if I just give this idea to the consumer, what's the first thought the consumer will get in? If such kind of a product exists, how does it look, right? Then the second part comes that if I have the conceptual design, how does my information architecture work there? Am I showing the right information? Like for example, if in this slide, in these slides, the first slide I had written, and you are a great product manager now. You would have said, dude, you have not taught us anything. And you're saying now you are a great product manager. How is that information structured? So the second most important piece is called the information design. That how do you structure information that people can make sense out of it? Then the third part is interaction design, right? That how do interactions takes place, right? That now you would essentially see. So if people have an Apple iPhone, right? Even if you're a group of 100, the notification is so similar that if you hear that notification, you would say somebody is using an iPhone for sure, right? Similar with another interesting thing. So do you think, okay, let me ask you a very interesting question. I'm sorry I'm taking slightly longer, but it's super interesting that you guys are. So you hear this line, Paytm पे 200 रुपए प्राप्त हुए. What do you think is the actual reason that this product was built? The reason is never to tell that the shopkeeper that you got 200 rupees. The reason is to tell them that the transaction is completed, because they don't care. They get like 20, 30, 50, 100 transactions a day. They cannot keep count, keep kab 50 rupees aaye, kab 200 rupees aaye, kab 250. But every time they hear that sound, they know that the transaction is completed. So they would ideally, so that is where the interaction design part comes in, that the product tells itself that this is the interaction and this is the value that I want. And then the last part is the visual design, where you say that I want to build a UI, UX, and do all of those things, build engineering around it, right? And that is why product managers start from the bottom and they go up. And that's why you see that most of the people, it's like an iceberg. You see just the top level over and you say that this is the product, but actually the product is like 10 layers deeper, right? But so next time, whenever you use any kind of product, ask yourself this question, that why do you think that this thing has happened? Like, why do you think Netflix has a Tamil filter but not a Telugu filter? Interesting question, right? You have to be curious about it, right? That why did they do it something like that, right? So just I wanted to kind of put across the fundamentals of how do you essentially design a product. Let's move forward. Yeah. Right. So this I kind of talked about, right? I just told you that sometimes the best way to gain control is to give control. This is how you develop the art of observation. And once you have enough observations, you build a hypothesis. That's what you call the user testing part of things, right? That you essentially say that I have done this. And then the last, let's move forward. Yeah. Yeah. So another skill of a very good PM is called the art of prioritization. Like if I ask today, probably Suresh or Suma or anybody who's in the chat, that give me your story, that what you've done in the last 7 years, right? You probably would say that you would take like 5,000 words to essentially say, I started from my family, then I did this certification, then I moved to this company, then I worked here, then I did this, then I did this, and right now I'm doing this, right? It will take you so much time to do that, right? But if I just flip the question to you and say, okay, Suresh, can you tell me your life story of the last 7 years in 100 words? But that's the constraint. So what would you do at that point? You would say, okay, I will remove what is irrelevant and keep whatever is relevant in those 100 words, so that I give 80% of the value what I could have spoken in 5,000 words. Now, why is this important? Now, if you build a product, right? If the people around you, right, who know you, right, are using the product and they are spending like 20 minutes to use that product or 10 minutes to use this product, and it takes them 10 minutes to figure out value or whatever and whatnot, why do you think a person who is on the internet, who has never seen you, never talked to you, would spend 5 minutes on your landing page understanding what value you are giving if you have not written it the right way? He's not your relative. He's going to say he's my nephew, so I'm going to take 30 minutes on the page and I would do what that person needs, right? So that's why prioritization is important. And one of the best way to prioritize is, and this will help you in writing better FRDs, better DRDs, better BRDs, right? The best way is put a constraint. Just say, I want to write this, but I want to write it in 300 words or 400 words. The moment you start thinking on this paradigm, you will automatically make it far more better for everybody else to consume, right? For engineering, whenever I used to write like PRDs or product requirement documents of like 20 pages, nobody used to read them, right? I was very comprehensive on I want this, I want this, I want this. The moment I shifted and started moving towards a 3-pager or a 4-pager, my engineering efficiency significantly improved, right? That's the second most important skill set, the art of prioritization. Let's move forward. Yeah. Right. And the last part that I want to kind of put across to you guys is that how do you essentially, once you have a problem, right, how do you essentially reach to a point where you say that which problem or which product feature is worth building, right? For example, I had a problem. I knew, I built a hypothesis, I built everything. Now I essentially want to understand that whether this feature would add value or not. So there is a very interesting framework, or it's not a framework, it's just a way of thinking, right? That's called the importance versus satisfaction framework, right? Now, on the left hand side, there is the importance part of it, right? That whether that problem is important or not, right? The right hand side, or the y or the x axis, right? The x axis, there is the satisfaction part of it. That what are the current solutions? What value are they giving? So if something is very low user importance, and you see there are four quadrants, right? If something is a very low user importance and very low satisfaction, you ideally don't care because people don't find it important, right? For example, if I tell you that, if I tell Suresh or anybody from here, Ravi or Gopakumar or Ravikant, that I'll build you a great seat belt, you would say, why are you building that? The seat belt just does the work fine, right? So you would not care, you would not buy it, right? Okay, if something is of very low importance and you build a great product, right, then also it doesn't matter. If it's not important to the end consumer, even if you build the best service in the world, doesn't matter, right? Third thing is, if something is very high importance and there is already a product which is actually solving it completely, this is like the competitive market, this is like the airline market. It's an essential service, but everybody gives the similar kind of value, right? That's why you would see that most airlines have similar pricing. They cannot contemplate and say that I will price my service 2x of that. You would go to Indigo, you would go to any other service, very similar prices. They cannot do it because there is not distinction, lot of distinction in their value. And that's why the airline industry is a $250 billion industry, but in profits it makes like a million, like 300, 400 million, 500 million. Rather, most airlines are loss making. Loss making. The last and the most interesting part, where most program managers, project managers, and product managers should work together, is an area where you essentially, there is very high importance that it's a major problem, but the current products are not solving it, right? One of the very good examples is something that you daily use is Jira. Jira was built with this mindset that I want to simplify the entire execution piece for a product, program, project manager, etc. But you realized that even though it's such a widely used product, then why do other people use products like Asana, Notion? Kyun kar rahe ho use? Why can't Jira do this? So there is some gap, and people have built across because they realize Jira is not doing this thing right or that thing right, right? So this framework automatically helps you develop that, okay, what feature would actually make sense? Okay, let's move forward. Yeah. So this is something that I put across. Low impact, low satisfaction doesn't matter. Low impact, high satisfaction doesn't matter. High impact, low satisfaction, very high opportunity area. And high impact, high satisfaction, very difficult to penetrate because everybody is giving the same service, right? Let's move forward. Yeah. So the last thing that I want to kind of leave you guys with is that one of the very important principles of becoming a great product manager, and which is essentially to become a great leader, is the art of feedback, right? A PM or a product manager in general has to be fundamentally accept. Can we just go back? Yeah, has to be. Go 2 slides back. Sorry. Just here only. Yeah. One of the very critical pieces that you have to be fundamentally accessible. What I mean by being fundamentally accessible is that whenever you build a product, right, you have to be consistently close to your users to get enough feedback that whether it's working or not, right? Now, while feedback is a very good thing, right, there is one more thing that I want to kind of you to be very susceptible, where people are susceptible to these problems, is this bias called confirmation bias. Like, I'll give you an example. At least to me, that's what my parents said. They said that if you go to IIT, you'll get a 1 crore package. Everybody who was around me told me the same. Never happened. So, or a lot of times, I would say that if you are coming from a lot of backgrounds, at least my mother used to tell me that, Shravan, why don't you wear this ring? Your anger will calm down. Your anger will calm down, or do something like that. So if 10 people say the same thing, doesn't mean it's true. right? This entire thing is called confirmation bias. So you essentially have to understand that how do I remove bias from a communication, right? How do I remove that? That's why one of the very critical pieces that how do you incorporate such a thing in your approach of doing user research and getting feedback, that you essentially remove bias. And that can only happen is when people are comfortable with you and they can tell you what is there in your heart, what is there in their heart, right? For me, humor works. Like, I'm very funny. I can talk to an engineer, I can talk to a SVP of product in very similar ways, right? They're very happy about it, right? So humor brings objective feedback, right? So you have to always ensure that you remove bias from, and there are multiple methods to do that. But I just want to tell you that this is important, that not every feedback is quality, right? You cannot just say that 20 of my customers are saying the same thing, which sales guys generally make a mistake. Most of the sales people, they essentially tell you, yaar mere sare customer bol rahe hain ye bana do, why don't you make this, right? That doesn't mean that you have to make it, right? So last thing that I want to kind of leave you guys with is that with this is that opinions are trivial, feedback is not, right? Finally, let's move to the next. Yeah. So I told you there are 3 layers of abstraction for becoming a great PM. It is called the art of critical thinking, where I told you that you essentially have to be compassionate and try to understand what problems others are facing. Second, art of prioritization, where you essentially say that I want to prioritize how do I write better FRDs, better DRDs for others to consume. And third, how do I build better feedback, right? And this is where you can essentially start thinking from the lines of a product manager, that this is what I want to do. And I'm telling you, as project managers, it's just one layer of mindset that you have to add, and you can become a very good PM, very good PM. And most PMs have like most PMs end up doing entrepreneurial things. You would see that most great PMs have essentially led becoming CEOs of companies. Sundar Pichai used to lead Chrome. Satya Nadella used to lead the cloud business for Microsoft, right? Simultaneously, there are tons of people. The founder of Thomas Kurian, who essentially leads the Google cloud business, was already doing product management for Oracle, right? So what I'm trying to put across is product management gives you the complete sense of the mindset that I don't have to just execute stuff. I have to start thinking from how do I solve that problem, right? I have to bring that solution across, and then I will execute it across. This is where I leave you. I hope you enjoyed whatever I told till now. Thank you very much. So Ravi is asking, no, we can close it. Yeah. So Ravi is asking, have you got 1 crore package? No, I didn't. So thank you, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for such a riveting session, Shravan. It's wonderful. Great things we learned from this session.
Yeah.
Any
Thank
question and answers from the folks? Shravan is here to give you answer. And meanwhile, I'll just go ahead and give a couple of announcements that we have. We have our PMP and ACP session. The PMP session is in when is this? August 26th and 27th and September 2nd and 3rd. Any other details regarding this PMP or ACP workshops, please go ahead and check with the WhatsApp or Academy at PMIPCC. -org, or for corporate inquiries, please visit the corporate email ID, and please scan this QR code and give us a feedback. This will help us to improve the sessions and also give you meaningful knowledge sharing sessions going forward. So please spend a couple of minutes in order to give us a good feedback. So we got some questions here, Shravan. If you have some time, we can go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you recommend any readings in product management, which is prequel to project management?
Sure. So I think what you can essentially do is there's this great book written by Dan Olson. I will just type the name for everybody to kind. It's called the Lean Product Playbook.
So that's the.
It's a very good starting point. It talks about principles of product management. It also talks about how you can essentially use those principles to become a better project manager, better program manager, or if you want to transition to product management in general. So it's a very good starting point. You can start looking from there, and it's a very easy read. Like, it'll take you probably 2 weeks if you read it like 10, 20 pages a day, right? If you do that, not more than that. It's a very good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And that question was asked by Guru Raj. And the next question from Naveen: what's on the critical skill that a great technical product manager cannot do without?
Sure. So I think what you have to essentially understand is there are two, three skills. One very interesting thing that you would want to learn if you want to become a great TPM is better at system design. How do you design large scale, scalable, concurrent systems? That is very important. Whether you are in a B2B company, whether you're in a B2C company, it really doesn't matter. So if you, that is something that you essentially have to learn. And the other two skills are very also important, which are like horizontal to the field of product management, is something called product sense and product execution. What I mean by product sense is that if I just randomly give you an ambiguous statement, can you break it down into structured parts? Like most of these PM interviews, whether you go to a Google's PM interview or something like that, the first question will not even be a technical question. The first question would be like, probably if they are just testing your product sense, they would say, should Netflix do ads? Something as ambiguous as that. Should Netflix do ads or not? Now it's a very ambiguous statement, right? You have to break it down, that what is their current business model, how are they making money, is there enough growth, what kind of churn it will happen. So, and you essentially build something to a point where you essentially say, based on these 7 8 assumptions or hypothesis, I've reached this point that they should do it. And this sense is called product sense. Product sense is the ability to essentially decipher that how do I break an ambiguous statement and break it into an actionable part where people can essentially value that these are the 5 steps through which I can validate that hypothesis. That's product sense. The second interesting skill that you essentially would need to learn is something called product execution. What I mean by product execution is, the most of employers would come to you with a problem already. They would say that, okay, I have a trading platform, my trading volume has decreased 10% week on week for the last 4 weeks. What essentially can be the problem? Can you debug that? That's something that's called product execution, right? So these are two major skill sets which are like horizontal. Then you can learn a little bit of design thinking, that how do you essentially build better designs and stuff like that. But if you just do product sense, product execution, and learn a bit of system design and understand how do you build large scale systems, I think that's good enough for you to essentially at least transition into like a technical PM role. But to develop product sense and execution, it takes time. It's not like it's as simple that you do a 7 day workshop and from the next day you are like a savant at product sense or not. Yeah, awesome.
And the next question is from Dheeraj. How sustainability of product in long term is addressed in product management?
So sure. So I think one of the very interesting things that people fail to realize is there is this very famous term that people use in product management called product market fit. That is there a product market fit, right? Now the beauty of this entire statement is that product market fit is not like a unit in time. It changes with time. So that's why feedback, like there might be a product market fit at a scale of 10,000 users, right? Like for example, if this session would have been with 1,000 people, right, then this kind of communication would have not been possible. So it's a bad product market fit. If I am doing 1,000-seater session here, it's not going to give that kind of engagement, right? But for a session size of probably 80 people, I can talk to you, I can look at these questions, right? So sustainability of a product in long term only happens when you consistently revisit the concept of product market fit. Is my product relevant now? Is my product relevant now? Is my product relevant now? And that can only happen when you consistently, after every release, take feedback, consistently improve the product, and that is how a long term sustainable product is actually built, right? It's not like a one time thing that you thought, okay, my vision was this, I built this, now it's going to sustain for the next 40 years. Doesn't work like that. Yeah, awesome.
And the next question is from Mohammad Sayuddin. Can a PM and QA role be handled by the same person?
Absolutely, for sure. I think QAs, salespeople, they have the best way of moving into product management because you are kind of closest to the consumer, right? So you're doing it. So you can do actually both the roles. But if you are a principal QA and your role is of QA, what I would ideally suggest is go to your manager, tell him that I don't just want to take care of the testing process, but I essentially want to take care of the entire project from the conception stage. It might be a small project. So one of the very good ways I tell people to move to transition from QA and other roles to product management is by giving small wins. That don't go to your manager and say, take, I'm taking like a $10 million project. Nobody's going to give you a $10 million project, right? Just tell them that I want to take care of this one small feature. I want to take this to production, and I want to be the whole and source POC of driving it across. Now if you do this entire piece of designing, writing the FRD of that feature, writing the PRD of that feature, and then taking it to the testing phase and finally developing it across, then you've done something like an entire product life cycle. And if you do consistently 2 3 and people around you start to realize that you have kind of done it right, then your transition becomes very easy, because now people have something to back on that you have already shipped out 3 features, and those are currently getting used by consumers. Yeah, awesome.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the first job profile we need to take up to enter the product manager
What do you mean by
career
I
path?
didn't understand? What is the first job profile we need to take? Okay, are you putting it like should I first become an engineer and then become a PM? If you're talking, if I understood your question correctly, right? So I think there are 2 3 ways, right? One way is that you essentially say that I want to move into an engineering company and I have that kind of a background and I kind of move in and make an internal transition, right? The other way is that another way is that you essentially say that okay, I'll go to a B school and probably uh, do and become a PM from there. The third way, which essentially is the cheapest but one of the most hardest, is that you actually build a portfolio for yourself. You say that I have built like these 5 things in my spare time, right? And these are 5 different applications. Like I'll give you a very simple example. In my college, when I was in, I'm long back talking about 2012, right? So I built this interesting application with 2 of my friends called Cop Radar. What was Cop Radar? That you essentially can find where you can essentially put pinpoint a location and say there's a cop in on that at that particular road, right? And we built the entire thing. We built the entire thought process that why should we build it? Long story short, it got sold to ADP long back, right? We sold it for $60,000. I'm talking about 2012, right? So long story short, but once I went to a PM interview, where once they saw this that you've built this, they said you did exactly what we want you to do, right? This was like a kind of a experience certificate that I got, that I actually built something, right? And I moved into a PM role. So there can be multiple ways, right? The third way is the hardest, but it's generally the most rewarding also, because you consistently keep thinking about how do you build product sense, product execution, and things like that. And if you build a portfolio on top of it, nothing like it. Yeah.
The last question is, are there any factors which are also important other than technical design, functionality, price, and ease of use of a product?
Okay.
This is
Are
from
there
Prashant Kanjilal. Are there?
Okay. Yes. So hygiene factor, delight are 2 important factors in a product development. Nokia as a product was leading mobile phone, but now it's nowhere. We can't say the Nokia didn't know the principles of product design. Are there features which? So okay, so it's not about the principles of product design. The thesis is also that how you built a hypothesis. So Nokia failed, right? Because they did a poor job in the problem space, right? Eventually, see, I'll tell you something. You have to start thinking. A lot of times, you asked actually a very good question. So, a lot of times, it's not about what people want us to build. You don't build for people wants. If you, if somebody today asks me, "What do you want?" I'll say, "I want an Aston Martin." But but do you build that, right? So you build for needs of people, right? So the role of a product manager is to identify the user's need, and what is the solution is something that is why you're getting paid for, right? That you have to design that solution. If the customer is only telling you कि ये बनाना है तो फिर क्या कर रहे हो? फिर what's the whole point, right? So the problem was that they misunderstood the consumer's need, right? They essentially didn't understand that while Android was going open source, right, it was giving them a lot of flexibility to get away from software and focus a lot more on hardware, right? And software is already taken care of by Google, right? And they built a commonality, a common functionality, and since there were so much value added services, Nokia came very late into that ecosystem, right? They essentially tried to do so. There is a philosophy by Microsoft that we'll build a closed ecosystem. And they always used to build like that, and now they are eventually building, becoming more open and open with time, right? But till Steve Ballmer and the previous CEOs, they always had this thesis that no, like Apple, Windows is going to be a closed ecosystem, right? So that is the reason they built the Windows phone, but they couldn't scale it, right? Because most of the people, like 90% of the world, essentially had gone, because every other vendor was using Android, right? So 90% acquisition happened from there, right? So whatever they could do, these people. So it is the same thesis, like why people. So one of the very interesting question I just want you to leave with this thought, and you should think about this thought, is that Stuart Butterfield, the CEO of Slack, he said that we build our products with love, right? But do you know what Satya Nadella said? The love will only matter when people will switch to using Slack. Will not let them do that. So I just want to kind of keep you this, that we build for user needs, we don't build for wants. Yeah, awesome.
Perfect. Absolutely riveting. I mean, the answers also thought provoking. Thank you, Shravan. It's wonderful. Um, and as we already mentioned, there will be one PDU credited to you very soon. Give us a couple weeks time. There's a technical issue going on with the PMI right now. I think once it's settled, will be the PDU will be awarded. So that's and as a thank you token, Shravan, we are honored uh, to tell you that there is a ticket of 5 trees that we are planting on your name in the Sundarban forest
Oh
that
wow.
will help for the tigers, and you will receive the certificate in your email as well. You can use the certificate number to locate the trees and see their development anytime. So thank you very much for that, and it really is a very good session and lot of learning that we had as a project managers and how to move into the product management, because now there is a shift that is happening slowly, although everybody knows it, but it is kind of going under the carpet, kind of where it is a paradigm shift coming to be in a product side rather than project management now. So it's a wonderful session, a lot of learning, and thank you very much for your time. And thank you all for joining on this Saturday morning to learn about this product management and how a person or a project manager can move into the product side and thinking of a product management point of view. So thank you very much. And I'm stopping the recording now.
Once again, I am super honored. Thank you very much for inviting me, folks.